Good afternoon from us here in Malaysia, and good morning or good evening if you're joining us from around the globe. I, Sharmila, a founding member of Climate Governance Malaysia, am delighted to welcome all of you to the fourth day of this inaugural Global Summit on Climate Governance. This Global Summit, which started on Tuesday and runs till tomorrow, the 26th of March, has been organized by Climate Governance Initiative and its national chapters in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. And this session, Accelerating Corporate Climate Action, which kicks off the fourth day of events, is being hosted by us Climate Governance Malaysia in partnership with Goal 13 Impact Platform. Global climate change has already had observable effects on the environment. The net damage costs of climate change are significant and likely to increase over time. This is impacting the way consumers, employees, shareholders, investors, and other stakeholders evaluate companies. Businesses are facing increased risk, but also opportunities related to climate change and are increasingly expected to assess and disclose their climate risks. Boards of directors must take cognizance of this. However, many boards and non-executive directors in particular just do not have sufficient competencies to make climate discussions and considerations a part of the board agenda. Yet, as the governing body of the company, the responsibility to consider climate-related issues is required, and this takes great courage to learn, to know, to discuss the risks and opportunities, and to be able to steer the company accordingly. Because for many companies, significant business transformation may be required. One of the core functions of Climate Governance Initiative and its national chapters is to equip non-executive directors with the necessary information, knowledge, and skills to address climate change at the board level. There are more than 20 local chapters throughout the globe, so please look them up if you're interested in finding out more about other events or about starting a national chapter in your own home country. Goal 13 Impact Platform, a partnership between some key industry players, including Deloitte, Dell Technologies, Chapter 0 under the umbrella of Climate Governance Initiative, of which Malaysia's Climate Governance Malaysia is the Malaysian chapter, and others, has been set up to support companies in managing the transition to a low-carbon, resilient, and valuable future. Sam Baker from Deloitte, who will be moderating this session, will share more about the platform and how you or your company can participate. But before we get into the meat of today's session, just some housekeeping. We expect this session to be filled with practical approaches to effective target setting and carbon reduction by a variety of corporate leaders. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, 2 keynote addresses, one from Latin America and one from here in Malaysia, after which there will be an opportunity of Q&A. And we also expect a robust sharing of real-world experiences during the panel discussion. So please post your questions in the Q&A box. And this is an excellent opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. However, if we don't get to all your questions during the session, please be assured that we will respond in writing via the email addresses you used to register for this session. And so now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Gilberto Tomazoni, all the way from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thank you for joining us so early, Gilberto. Gilberto Tomazoni has been the global CEO at JBS SA, the world's second largest food company and the world's largest animal protein company since 2018. He has almost 40 years experience in the food industry and draws on a wealth of knowledge, having previously served as president of the Global Poultry Division of JBS and having chaired the board of Pilgrim's Pride Corporation since 2013. He is also the member of International Advisory Board of Fundacio, I hope I pronounced that right, Dom Cabral, FDC. Before joining JBS, he spent 4 years with Bunge Alimentos as Vice President of Foods and Ingredients, also serving as Executive Director for South and Central America. And prior to that, he served 27 years with Sadia, where he started as an intern and went right up to becoming CEO. Tomazoni has earned an MA degree in Management Development in 1991 and a BSc degree in Mechanical Engineering in 1982. As JBS CEO, he has led the formation of Sara Alimentos. As you can imagine, greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related issues would be key considerations for the JBS board and management. So I hope like me, you can't wait to hear from Gilberto on his experiences and insights on how he and his board have accelerated climate action at JBS. Over to you, Gilberto.
Good morning. It is my distinct honor to be part of today's summit in the presence of so many influential leaders dedicated to confronting the greatest challenge of our time, the climate change. I would like to thank the World Economic Forum for inviting me for this important discussion. In order to successfully combat the climate change, a strong partnership between the public and private sector, like the World Economic Forum, are absolutely essential. The same is true for the massive challenge of fighting COVID-19 around the world that we are all collectively faced at the moment. Humans are being drivers for the climate change, and the population growth is a key issue. But the human beings are also the only ones that have the power to act. We are here to share with you how we will act and to be inspired by your example. According to estimates from the United Nations, the world population is expected to grow from 7.7 billion people today to nearly 10 billion people by 2050. That is 2 billion more mouths to feed and 2 billion more lives that have the right to pursue their dreams and fulfill their destinies. We must act, stimulate and adopt new agricultural technology, such as a precision and regenerative agriculture. We need to preserve our natural environment and our forest. And definitely, we need to feed our growing population in a sustainable manner. We must make every meal healthy and nutrition for the families that consume it, and good for the planet that produces it. I have the pleasure of serving as a global CEO of JBS, the second largest food company in the world, with operations that extend from Brazil to Europe and from North America to Australia. The food we produce helps improve the health and nutrition of millions of people around the world every day. And our business is only possible because of the effort of farmers and ranchers. JBS sits an intersection between the farmers and the consumer, transforming farmers' work into food products sustain human life. Given our position and scale, we have the opportunity to lead the transformation of agriculture and livestock markets and make them more productive, more sustainable, and part of the global climate solution. And we intend to grab that opportunity with both ends. That's why early this week, we became the first major company in our sector to commit net zero greenhouse emissions by 2004 and join the United Nations Race to Zero campaign. Net zero is not just the right thing to do. It is only the option as a society. Global warming is already having a devastating impact on the most vulnerable of our global citizens. If we don't act now, the world will face a climate disaster. At JBS, we have a passion for sustainable agriculture, and the men and women who work hard every day to provide the food for their families and the world. We understand agriculture can and must be a part of a global climate solution. We believe in innovation, investment, and collaboration in nature-based solutions that help mitigate climate change. Our net zero commitment means that we will set emission reduction targets aligned with limitation global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We will reduce emission in our operation by increasing efficiency, investing in green technology, and converting 100% of our electricity source to renewables. It will also mean that we will lead the intensification of nature-based solutions, such as a sustainable and regenerative agriculture practices and forest restoration. In Brazil, according to recent estimates, illegal deforestation represented 98% of all deforestation alert in the country. We set our path to eliminate illegal deforestation from our supply chain more than a decade ago, establish zero illegal deforestation policy, and develop a satellite-based monitoring system to track more than 50,000 direct cattle suppliers in Brazil. We have recently started to implement a new platform that will use blockchain technology to monitor the suppliers of our suppliers in the Amazon by 2025 and all other biomes in Brazil by 2030. We understand the magnitude of the net zero commitment and the hard work that will be required to achieve this ambition. Over the next decade, we will invest $1 billion to increase sustainability of our operation, and we will link executive bonus to climate change performance. We will also invest $100 million in agricultural research and development over the next 10 years to help farmers around the world increase productivity without harvesting any more forest or expanding agricultural footprints. No one has all of the answer, and the challenge before us is great. But if we adopt the right mindset and focus our effort, energy, investment, human potential on fighting global change, together, we will still might be able to save our planet for the future generation. And if so, we'll be proud that our action today led a better future tomorrow. Thank you.
Gilberto, thank you very much, and many congratulations on joining the Race to Zero. That's fantastic news. So Matthias, if we could just have the agenda slide up, please. So I have got a few questions for you, Gilberto, but just before we do that, I just want to take people through the agenda. So I'm Sam Baker. So Sharmila, thank you very much for introducing me. I'm a Deloitte strategy consulting partner, but the reason I'm moderating this panel is because I'm leading something called the Goal 13 Impact Platform Initiative. I will explain what that is after we've had a bit of Q&A with Gilberto. So a little bit of Q&A with Gilberto. So many questions, so many fascinating points made. We're then going to have a short spell just talking about this specific initiative, which I've referenced, and so Sharmila, so thank you for that, Sharmila. We've then got 4 fantastic panelists, and so thank you, panelists, for stepping up. We'll first of all hear who they are, and then we're going to have this discussion across 4 components of climate action. So we're going to focus on targets and drivers, so the sorts of commitments the organizations that the panelists represent are making, and perhaps some broader reflections on what's driving those commitments. The second thing we're going to do is think about organizing for change. So how are we actually setting up our sort of programs of change which to deliver on the actions and the changes required by those commitments? The third is then to dive into very specific actions that people are taking and reflect on the impact they're having. And then finally, think about barriers and lessons learned. So barriers, why isn't our ambition bigger, even bigger, perhaps than some, and how can we go faster than we are at the moment? We're then very pleased to have Datuk Sazali Hamzah with us from Petronas Chemicals, who will have a closing keynote, and then we will close at the end. And just in terms of the point that was made by Sharmila about Q&A, it may very well be we don't get your questions during the session, but we will do after. So please keep those coming in. Okay, but with that, some Q&A with Gilberto. So Gilberto, thank you for that. And I guess, you know, many of us who aren't perhaps in your industry think about, you know, meat and dairy, look at the large proportion of emissions. I think the FAO reported on this being 14.5% of worldwide emissions. So I guess my question to you, is it all about transforming how meat and dairy is produced, or is it actually a change in the portfolio per se?
JBS will achieve net zero by 2040, including the company's global operation as well as its diverse value chain. Thus, will be certainly transform our production. Let me give you a specific example. In comparison to regular farmers, sustainable and modern ones are able to increase by 40% their food production, and instead to emitting greenhouse gas, they sequester it. These achieve this extraordinary result by combining grain production, such as corn or soy, livestock, and forest regeneration. These already exist in Brazil and elsewhere as well. What we must do urgently is to invest in this model and expand it exponentially. JBS is also focused on a range of nature-based solutions like investment in reforestation and forest restoration. We truly believe that advancing in natural-based solutions are essential if the world is arriving at net zero emission and low carbon economy. In regard to products, we already have a robust portfolio of organic and plant-based items, for instance. We also have an intensive innovation pipeline. However, it's worth stressing our commitment to be net zero is not about the products or that product. JBS will be net zero by 2004 across all of our value chain. And this covers all of our portfolio.
Okay, thank you, Gilberto. Yeah, and exciting, you know, exciting the level of ambition, certainly. And certainly if JBS do that and then the sector respond in kind, then clearly we're making, you know, big inroads against a very significant source of emissions. So that's fantastic. So just one more question, and this is really about the time you've set it for. So obviously to be raised to zero, my understanding is you don't have to set a target, you know, you have to set a target from 250 or before. You've chosen 240. The research that we're doing as part of the initiative that I'll be talking about, I think the earliest net zero target is 2036, something like that. So given the sector and the changes required, how did you select 2040? I mean, that is on the shorter end of, you know, that's the sooner end of those targets. So how did you select the 2040 versus any other date and probably a later date?
This is a simple answer. Because we are facing an emergency. The global warming is already affecting the life around the planet. This is the greatest challenge of our time. So everyone must do it maximum to save the world. JBS is the second largest food company in the world. We are the leader in protein. Therefore, we can and we must be ambitious. We have an obligation to our consumers, employees, customers, shareholders, partners, and the whole planet. We will fulfill our purpose, especially because food production, our core business, is already being affected by the climate change. We sincerely hope in how our year will manage to share lessons and coordinate action for the planet's benefit. That is why I am so glad by sharing ideas and experience with this group today, so we can learn together.
Okay, fantastic, Gilberto. Thank you so much. So I think that sharing coordination point, I suspect we're going to hear more of that over the next 90 minutes. And yes, I think we'd all agree, absolutely critical. So thank you. So moving on then. So we're going to just talk about the Goal 13 Impact Platform Initiative. So if we can have that slide up, Matthias, please. So this initiative came about 10 months ago. And it is a partnership, as Sharmila touched on some of the partners, but it's a partnership, and this is important. It's a non-commercial partnership between the Confederation of British Industry in the UK, between Deloitte, between Accounting for Sustainability, between Chapter Zero, which is the UK arm of CGI, Dell Technologies, and we have Dell here with us today, and also the Met Office in the UK. So, and these partners have come together to really support exactly what Gilberto has talked about, which is the sharing, or one part of it anyway, which is the sharing of ideas and best practice. And so what we are seeking to do is to create a free, open access repository to promote the learning and the collaboration on climate-related activities. The information that we put in that repository is focused on climate action. So I think that there are, I think the Race to Zero is doing a fantastic job clearly on stimulating people to sign up to targets and commitments. I think, Oxford, ICC, many others are working to create, roadmaps, sector pathways, as is indeed the policymakers and trade associations. What we're trying to do is just sort of plug a gap in the middle where we think we have open access and free access to what people are doing at the moment on a reasonably comparative basis. So the action piece is really, really important. We do put a little bit of context around that. And so in terms of context, we do ask about the targets and commitments, which of course are typically public, but some of them are, some of the subsidiary targets less so. We do ask about the drivers of change, which I think is a really, really important dynamic. That world is evolving so quickly. We then ask about organization, so how people are organizing to deliver on those initiatives. And that reinforces whether or not the target is an empty target, or actually it's really driving change. And we then get to the actions themselves and dive into those and talk about the level of impact. And then we finalize by talking about the barriers. And so you'll see the nature of the questions we ask the people that the organizations we reach out to are similar to the structure of the conversation today. So far today, we've reached out to about 1,700 organizations. We've interviewed about 240. And each of those interviews then results in notes back to the company we've interviewed. We validate those and we get their permission to then put this up on our repository. It has been UK focused, but we're now rolling out in India, Nordics, Italy, Malaysia, US. Italy particularly important for us because it's a co-hosting the COP this year. But also it's fantastic that we get read across both across sectors and across geographies. And it really just underpins that point about coordination and sharing that Gilberto made. This is not a niche sport. It's not something people can do on their own. We can progress, we can be leaders, but we need the system to come with us to support strong value creation and business growth. The platform itself is built in beta version. So you can get on that and you can see the analysis of the interviews that we've done. And we're building out the collaboration functionality, which will allow companies to reach out to each other, but also create action groups. So these are groups that people might want to invite others to work together as a group. We won't curate those groups, but we will convene those groups. And then those groups will do what they may. And that might be cross-sector, cross-geography, etc. Clearly, promoting this through the likes of this type of session is one way of trying to meet our objectives of learning and collaboration. So, the questions, the interaction with the panel, that all contributes to this. And where we're trying to get to is 1,000 interviews by COP26. So the value of this platform is really highly dependent on the volume and the quality of the insights that we get from organizations. So what I would say is if your organizations aren't already part of the platform, please get in touch, please sign them up. Let's carry out that interview and let's get your organization on the platform so you contribute to sharing that information, but also hopefully get some, opportunity there to increase your collaboration with the broader system to your benefit, and also some amplification of your key messages. So just on the right-hand side, we'll send out the slides after, but there's a number of links in there to reports, to social media postings, to the platform itself, importantly, and then an email address to get in touch with us as you desire. So thank you very much. That's the initiative, and we're going to use the initiative to inform some of the topics we talked through with the panel. In addition to that, each of the panelists have all contributed to this platform. So their organizations have contributed to this platform, both as respondents to the interviews, and in the case of Dell, actually as a founding partner as well. So let us move on. What I'd like to do now is just to introduce the panelists before we dive into the specific topics. So Matthias, let's move on to that next slide. Okay, so Matthias, show the slide, and then I think we're going to start with Paige. So first of all, I'd just like to thank very much the panelists for being with us. It's tremendous to have you here. Thank you for your contribution to the platform so far. And Paige, over to you. Off mute. Paige, off mute.
Apologies, I thought I unmuted. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Paige Moats. I'm the Global Head of Sustainability for Dell Technologies, which is a global technology company headquartered in the US that builds and provides a broad portfolio of technology products and end-to-end solutions addressing a variety of needs from our diverse customer base. And in my role, I oversee the company's strategic sustainability vision, public commitments and goals, and strategy for innovation in this space, as well as key internal and external engagement. So very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. David Croft.
Good morning, Sam. Good morning, everybody. So I'm David Croft. I look after sustainability for Reckitt. We are Reckitt as of today, not Reckitt Benckiser as we were yesterday. Many of you have seen my LinkedIn post will know we've rebranded. Reckitt is a 200-year-old company. We specialise in personal care and household goods. You might not know the name particularly, but you will know our brands, particularly, I'm certain, through the pandemic. So it's brands like Dettol or Lysol, but we're also involved in infant formula, a wider range of health care products, self-care products, and home and hygiene products. You probably wash your dishwashers using many of our products and things like that. My job within RB is very much setting up and steering our sustainability agenda across the whole business. So full life cycle, all the value chains and different markets around the world. We trade in about 180 different countries. And we have been really moving the conversation forward from what was, I think, largely a compliance-driven discussion into something that is much more performance-centric and underpins our rejuvenating business growth strategy under our new CEO. So that's Reckitt, and we'll get into some more detail soon, Sam.
Fantastic. Thank you. JJ.
Hello, everyone. My name is JJ Freijo, and I'm the head of sustainability for Brambles, an Australian company that operates under the brand CHEP. And we are a B2B company, probably not as famous as the companies of some of my colleagues in the panel, but what we do is that we provide circular packaging services. If you are a manufacturer or a distributor, you need packaging to move your goods across the whole supply chain. And basically you have two options. You can buy packaging and then dispose of it at the end of the life cycle, or you can rent it. You can use reusable packaging. That's what we do. We offer reusable pallets, crates, and containers. And once they have been used, we collect them and make sure that they are reused over and over and over again. If you multiply this very simple model, circular model that I described by 330 million units, and then 60 countries, more than 60 countries, you will have an idea of the scales of what we do in the circular space. I'm the head of sustainability, so running the program in the company, and feel very privileged about that.
Thank you, JJ. David Lance.
So I'm David Lance. I'm the Sustainability Manager at Scania Southeast Asia. And for those of you who don't know us, we're the world-leading commercial vehicle manufacturer, originally from Sweden. We've been around for 130 years. We make heavy commercial vehicles, so buses and trucks. And for us, our purpose is to drive the shift towards a more sustainable transport system. After all, the transport system is the lifeblood of our society, something that we've very much seen throughout the pandemic. So although most of society has been shut down, our trucks are still operating, transporting goods from factories and farms to supermarkets and out to consumers. Unfortunately, we also have a very big impact on the climate and CO2 emissions, and that's why we need to reduce them. So my responsibility is to primarily work in partnership with our customers to see how we can reduce their carbon footprint. And today I'm very happy to be here to share what our targets are and how we work with that out in the markets.
David, thank you very much, and thank you all four of you. So if we could just go to the introductory slide of the first topic, Matthias. So the first topic is around targets and commitments, but then also barriers. I'll start each of the topics with a very, very quick insight coming from the sort of summary insight coming from the platform. So in terms of targets and drivers, the first point about targets, I think, is as we've seen, as we heard from Gilberto, I think the race to zero is galvanizing and promoting this concept of net zero. We are beginning to understand that, not just as corporations and companies and sustainability people, but as boards, even as citizens. So I think that is great. Notwithstanding that, of the people we get on the platform at the moment, actually the number who actually have a net zero target is less than half. So work to be done, certainly. I think undoubtedly the targets though are becoming longer term and more profound, which I think is a great thing, but of course they need to be matched by shorter term plans and indeed current actions. So I think we still see, in terms of targets, a reasonably fragmented landscape. We still see the need for a little bit more consolidation, and we still see the need for interim targets and then genuine representation of action against those targets to really be confident that we are delivering on those big promises. But all in all, I think it's optimistic, it's a dynamic situation, and I think Race to Zero is really helping, and I think Gilberto really underpinned that. Just flipping on to drivers of change then. So one is obviously the targets that are being made. The second is what is causing people to make those targets. So is it philanthropy? Is it a recognition that the end of the world is nigh? Or is it a little bit closer to home around the business, around the the validity and the confidence with which you're stepping forward in your strategy, your value creation? And for me, if it is the former, if this is about sort of philanthropy, then that to me is challenging, because we have a system based, our corporate sort of our capitalist system based around businesses, based around value creation. It means we've got to change everything. And what our research shows, interestingly, is actually the key driver is the market. So whether it's a business customer or a consumer, we're now moving to the point where a low carbon, sustainable product is not just a sort of niche preference, but it's actually a core preference alongside functionality and price. So that for me is extremely encouraging, because it means that we're not necessarily talking about a fundamental system change to something that we don't really know what it looks like. We're actually saying we've got to harness the power of the system that we have. So that's one thing. I guess the other thing to point out here is, and closely related to that, is commercial opportunities is the third driver. So, this isn't just a sort of, we've got to survive, so the customers are asking us to do something. This is actually a commercial opportunity, not just a risk that we need to respond to. So I pair those, I get great confidence from them. The internal drivers are slightly further down. Investor expectations are further behind that. They are important, but I think they're seen as one of many inputs at the moment. Definitely that investor conversation is increasing. And all of these comments, by the way, of course, differ by sector and by size of organization, by the base of, the nature of your capital base. Of course they do. But I think the key point, which is the market is driving change, I think is very encouraging. So with that, if I could move to Paige, please, for a few comments around targets and drivers, please.
Yes, so I would say like many folks out there, we have had a set of goals for a while. And in fact, about 18 months ago, set a new set of goals for 2030 around scope 1, 2, and 3. Dell's carbon footprint, truthfully, our scope 3 is the largest, first being use of sold product. Our customers' use of our product is the largest part of our footprint and the hardest to tackle. Then followed quickly by supply chain. The very smallest slice is our own operations. That being said, we do have not only scope 1 and 2 operational and renewable energy goals, but we also have pretty aggressive supply chain goals, as well as a goal that will expire soon, and we're working on a replacement set of interim goals around product use. But we don't believe that our current 2030 goals are enough. And so I'm not ready to go as far as Gilberto did earlier and do a complete exclusive, but I will tell you we're in the final stages of developing and preparing for a launch of our own net zero goal as a company, encompassing fully those scopes 1, 2, and 3 that I mentioned, all to be science-based. Our current goals are science-based. At least one of them is SBTI validated today. The others are in front of SBTI, hopefully to be validated within the next 30 days. But that's directionally where we're going. So we're fully leaning in to the net zero space and hope to make that announcement soon. From a driver standpoint, very much in line with what you're seeing on the platform. We see this not as a risk scenario only, we see this as an opportunity scenario. And one of the key drivers, the two big drivers for us are both our customers, who not only want Dell to do the right thing as a critical partner of theirs, but they also want us to help them on their own journey. They have their own goals. So how is Dell creating our products and services in a way to help them decarbonize? How are we able to think about technology in service of these bigger, either individual customer needs or broader systemic climate issues? So that's where Dell is putting our focus and effort. And of course, our employees, more and more we're seeing our employees really ask us how we're doing more to be aggressive. And so along with our employees and our leadership, I would think that is probably our key drivers.
Okay, well, thank you, Paige. Really looking forward to that announcement, of course. But yeah, good luck with that, and yeah, reassuring to hear about certainly the market. So David Croft, compare and contrast to that as we talk about Reckitt, newly named Reckitt.
Thank you, Sam. Not terribly different. In terms of the way our footprint shapes up, it's not dissimilar to what Paige just described for Dell, in the sense that our own manufacturing setup, large as it is, 50 odd factories around the world, is still a relatively small chunk of our overall footprint. There's a much larger chunk in terms of consumer use. But last year we confirmed our position towards net zero by 2040. But to your earlier point, Sam, we also set out a 2030 interim goal, and that's very much SBT driven. It's about delivering our part of Paris Accord, and that means for us around about a 2/3 reduction in absolute carbon in scope 1 and 2, plus a 50% product carbon footprint reduction. So that there's been lots of progress made already in scope 1 and 2 from our perspective, and there's been some progress on product, but that's where I think more effort is going to have to come, certainly over the next 5 years, to get us towards where we want to be by 2030. To your points about drivers, I mean, multiple, just as Paige was saying, certainly a consumer demographic change, an expectation change from consumers around the world. And I actually see this even more pronounced going through the pandemic. I think the pandemic has set out for people that if you're not making a broader societal contribution, if your only focus is on the bottom line, then frankly, you're not playing the role of the global corporate citizen that I think is expected today. There's certainly an expectation amongst our customers, and we work very closely with our retailers, both in terms of bricks and mortar and e-com retail customers around climate change. That's why we also last year signed up and partnered with Amazon on their climate pledge. And I think that's very helpful for collaboration to create scale. Thirdly, our own teams. I mean, Reckitt's 44,000 strong team has a high percentage of millennials, and their expectation that this is something our business should be driving forward and making a contribution on, playing our part, is really significant. I think as we look at employee engagement, the sustainability agenda is one of the most powerful pieces that we see motivating our teams around the world in different ways in different marketplaces, for sure, but collectively very important. And then fourthly, and certainly by no means least, the investor conversation. I speak to an investor on a regular basis, a couple of times a month these days, it seems, and their expectation around progress on climate is really apparent, and it's not necessarily about the fear of stranded assets. I mean, certainly that's there, but what they want to know, I think, is an understanding of the steps we're taking, the roadmap we have to 2030 and beyond, and how that is framing through alongside the wider business agenda that this is part of. And I think for me, that's the most important point to make in this setup. The big driver for us is that climate change and the wider sustainability conversation is fundamentally part and parcel of our business conversation. I don't talk about a sustainability strategy. We have sustainability ambitions that underpin and support and enable the business strategy. It's not separate, it's part of. That's really important for the internal conversations.
Okay, so David, thank you very much for that. Interestingly, some common themes there. Obviously, you've added in the capital markets piece, but some common themes. So what I'll do now, you've got to sort of segue there into our organizational conversation. So then JJ and David, let's pick up sort of targets and organization just after I've introduced that next topic. So Matthias, let's see that organizational slide. So I think, as we said, fantastic to have the targets, really exciting to understand, that they're driven by the market in large part. But I think that how people organize against these things is obviously really, really important. So is it a niche sport, or is it, as David Croft was saying, is it heart of the business model? And so what we've done in the interviews that we've done, the research through this platform, is ask a number of questions, which tries to get us to the answer of a level of maturity against climate change. And so the questions we ask is, where is it positioned? Is it strategic? Is it top down? The second is the scope. Is it broad? Is it across all the sort of domains of climate, together with all the parts of the business? Who's involved? Is this sort of sustainability or sustainability in somebody, or has it got strategy, investor relations, finance, technology involved? And then finally, how is it managed? Is this disparate, or is it highly coordinated and cohesive? So we ask those questions, and then we have a very simple sort of cycle of maturity, starting at 1, where it's an overlay. So you've got the business going left, you've got the climate target shooting in and trying to sort of divert a little bit the direction of the business, all the way to the other end, where you've got something which is fully integrated, which I think is what David Croft was beginning to explain there, where it's the heart of the business model, it's how you do business, it's part of the formula for success, and therefore the chance of dissonance, there'll still be challenges, of course there will be, around misalignment of different KPIs, but basically you've got an overall cohesive understanding of where this fits into the business, and therefore a set of principles which allow you to make the lower level trade-offs under a broad aligned set of objectives. So that's where we are. So now if we can pick up sort of where as we were sort of moving through the panelists, so perhaps JJ, we could ask you now. So let's think about both perhaps the targets and drivers, if we may, but also how you're then organizing against them.
So for the first part, for targets and drivers, I think it's really good to see how aligned we are. Because I mean, with Paige and David, I can really relate to most of the things, or to everything that you just said. We committed to 100 renewable energy and net zero carbon operations in the very short term, immediately, and also to a 1.5 degrees climate future. And for us, that drives more action in the short term. We will have an intermediate target for 2025. For us, it's important not to just to have targets for 2040 or 2050 that are necessary, but also some short-term targets. Also, I think it's absolutely critical for the audience to understand that this is about the value chain. For every company that I know of, 90% of emissions happen in the value chain. So let's focus there. As for the drivers, just probably one comment. I refuse to choose between the philanthropic dimension of it and the business dimension of it. I always respond the same thing. It is both. Why do we need to choose? Why do we need to choose? And everything I saw in your slide really reflects what we are experiencing. Employees attracting talent at senior level, not just the young students that come to the company to make a better world. Even very senior leaders join us for that. And for the investor community, David, absolutely. I mean, in the last 18 months, I used to answer a couple of questions every 3 months, you know, around for investors. Now it's an ongoing conversation daily. And they want to know what the company, how the companies are going to survive in the future that is already here. You know, how prepared you are for this. What are the business opportunities? What are the risks, etc. Which is great, by the way. I absolutely love that. On the organization, in our case, probably the journey has been, in a way, a little bit easier because we were born circular. We are a circular economy company. We saw very, very early that this is part of our value proposition. We didn't have to go through the transition of being a linear company to a sustainable circular company. That has always been there. So in a way, it comes natural to us to have sustainability included in the strategy process, in the business reviews, in the product design. So it is not that when we talk about the strategy in our company, then we have, and by the way, the last slide is on sustainability. We are doing something here as well. It is really integrated in the conversation. And I can give you a couple of examples. Well, these are general ideas, and probably it's more useful to give you a couple of examples how we are developing service offers around sustainability, strategic service offers. We have this circular business model, as I said, that is about reusing packaging. And when you build something like this, you have something called circular foundations. You are already there. So you can use this to create other circular things. No? This is what we call the circular ecosystem. All of these things reduce carbon, by the way. When we provide a circular service, we are reducing carbon to our customers. By the way, David, hopefully you know this, but you are one of our customers, so you can benefit of that automatically. But also, and that is part of our value proposition, as I was saying, and included in the strategy plans. But we are creating more sustainable services. We just created a program, for example, called Zero Waste World, that is all about using our circular foundations to offer our customers with more solutions that are sustainable by using other kinds of reusable packaging, not just the ones that we are designing together, what the future of the reusable packaging in every step of the supply chain could be. Transport collaboration. We know that most of the emissions, and David, the other David, by the way, you know this much better than me. You know where that, at least in our company and probably in every manufacturing company, the transportation emissions are huge. We need to do something about that. So what we've done is to use the value of what we have, which is our network, those millions and millions and millions of pallets that are moving every day, to see how we can create efficiencies and create closed loops or continuous transportation flows with no empty miles to reduce transportation.
Okay, JJ, I'm gonna have to stop you there. So you've introduced transportation. Thank you. So that's a segue into David Lance. Yeah. So if you don't mind, so fascinating to hear about what you're doing there. I think the ecosystem thing is really interesting. But David Lance, please. We've introduced transportation. Let's go.
Sure. Just very quickly then to our targets, because that will relate to transportation. So our targets, we have a net zero target for 2030 for our own operations and our own production. We're the first commercial vehicle manufacturer who signed up for science-based targets. So we're on board for the 1.5 degree target. And we have an interim target of 2025 where we're cutting our carbon emissions in our own operations in half. But as has already been mentioned by JJ, transport, which we are part of the transport sector. So scope 3, when our customers use our product, that's by far the biggest emitter of CO2 emissions, because the transport system is so dependent on fossil energy still. So that represents 96% of all the emissions that we are related to in one way or another. So we have a global target of reducing our CO2 emissions for our customers by 20% by 2025. And just to go back to the drivers very quickly, I very much agree with the research that you've made and the findings that you have. it's not necessarily our customers. Our customers are users of commercial vehicles. That's a highly competitive industry. They will use whatever is the most affordable. However, it's their customers, the transport buyers, the likes of Dell, for instance, or Unilever, whoever it might be. They are putting the pressure on them, and also cities. We very much see cities taking the lead around the world in cutting down CO2 emissions. If you take a city like Stockholm, for instance, you know they've been carbon neutral for many years already. So we've seen that shift. So it's both a shift in terms of the customers, what they need, but at the same time, which is a very big factor for us, is that our industry is changing very fast. We haven't seen this much disruption since we went from horse and carriage into motorized transport. We've been making diesel trucks and buses for a very long time. And now suddenly we're going for renewable fuels, we're going for electric vehicles. So things are happening very fast. And that's very exciting. So we definitely see this very much as an opportunity. And I mean, as we have to be a part of this, we see it as a part of our survival. It's a part of the corporate culture. I think if we look at how we're organized to manage this goes through the entire organization. It goes all the way from the top, all the way down to the bottom. Being a Swedish company, it's very flat. So if the management only told us to do it, it wouldn't work. But we have built consensus around this for many years, and it's very much supported from the top. So for Scope 1 and Scope 2, it's our head of production who's responsible for that, and our head of sales and marketing is responsible for Scope 3 to reduce the CO2 emissions for our customers. But ultimately, our CEO is responsible for meeting those targets, and we take them very seriously.
Okay, David, thank you very much. And just so just a reflection here on for the audience. I think we've got a large number of non-execs participating in the audience, and a number of variety of other functions as well. And I think that what we're seeing, obviously what we're hearing, is that this is at the heart of business. It's the heart of the business model. It's going to change. The markets that each of these organizations are facing into are changing, and so these are absolutely critical to the custodians of the business, as well as the people who are executing the business, setting and executing the business strategy. So okay, excuse me. So if we can now move on to actions. So Matthias, if we could put that up. So and I think it's fascinating, both the differences obviously, and then the read acrosses across these different sectors. So moving into actions then. So we've talked about targets and commitments. We've talked about how we're organizing against that as well. And now really we want a couple of pithy examples of actions. So on the platform, we interrogate actions and then play them back in two ways. One is where in the value chain that action sits. So is it upstream, downstream? Is it part of operations? We've already heard some of that scope 1, 2, 3 conversation already. But then the second is, what is the domain? So is it in and around energy consumption and generation? Is it around energy efficiency in buildings? Is it transport, et cetera, et cetera? And so we categorize the initiatives in those two different ways. Plenty to talk about on the back of the platform. No time today, other than please just remember that sort of categorization. So when you go back into the platform, have a look at it. And that second point, engagement and education, that's basically both upstream and downstream. So if you go back to Gilberto's talk, talking about the need to educate and work with his supply chain in order to help them reduce emissions, which helps Gilberto deliver on his target. The engagement education piece, I think, is a sign of this market being relatively immature. So crucial to get in there, engage and educate, rather than just, mandate, for instance, a low emissions target from your supply chain. So anyway, enough from me. So can we go to Paige and just ask about sort of, one or two initiatives, one or two climate actions that are happening at the moment, not planned, but at the moment?
Yeah, I would say that, JJ actually teed up nicely this circular piece, because, circularity and climate absolutely are connected and go hand in hand. For us, given that scope 3 is our biggest element, it's really in two places. One, we are doing deep engagement with our suppliers, because some of them are very large, big companies and know how to do this stuff, but others are not. And so it's really holding their hand, talking to them, engaging with them, talking about our programs and helping them set goals, commit to CDP disclosure, understand the process we went through, for example, in a TCFD assessment to look at risk and opportunity, just really walking them through best practices and helping them take that journey as well, because supply chain is critical. The other piece I would say is around circular materials and decarbonization in that way. We make electronics. We are fully responsible for those electronics. And so our customers are asking us, what efforts are you putting into not just the energy intensity of the products, which is a big part of that scope 3, but also how are you creating products that are more circular, that are dematerialized? How are you implementing processes that then benefit me as a consumer of those? So that is a huge place. And to JJ's point also, we've continued to expand a lot of our circular service offerings. So we actually, since 1996, have had a take back program in which you can give back Dell product or competitor product. We use those products at the true end of life. Of course, we refurb and reuse and resell where we can, but we attempt to harvest as much of that material as possible to make new products. Just a year ago, we had harvested upwards of 100 million pounds of just plastic alone out of those returned products. And we use that plastic in over 125 of our products now. So that continues to lower the product carbon footprint, which then benefits the company. So a lot of those initiatives have been kind of in flight and current programs that we continue to expand and scale.
Okay, thank you, Paige. And interesting, we've got Atia as one of your customers, which is on the platform, one of your distributors. We see the same thing there. So this ecosystem idea, so Atia, again, refurbishing, but also then recycling back into Dell and its other providers.
And Atia is actually a member with us in the Circular Electronics Partnership that was just announced through the World Economic Forum just last week. So yeah.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So David Croft, so action focused, you've touched on a couple, but please expand.
Yeah, just 2 or 3 quick examples, Sam. In scope 1, 2 operations, a heavy focus on shift to renewables, big dial up of renewable electricity, as you might expect, but that includes not just procurement, but self-generation, solar in many parts of the world where it's the best thing. And secondly, a big focus on energy efficiency improvements. Now, those 2 chunks alone will make a big step forward to our Paris targets by 2030. When I look at the product side, we have a sustainable innovation calculator that we apply to every new product development, no matter what the category or what the brand, and that gives us an indication of the carbon footprint, the water footprint. It also talks to the types of ingredients and the packaging we use. So progressively, that's meaning that every time we introduce a new product, it's a little bit more sustainable than the one before would look, but it gives us a focus. And it also means that we're able to dial up the conversation around opportunity. Are we designing products for a low water economy? Are we designing products progressively for a low carbon economy, even if the latter is still a little bit further down the line from a marketplace perspective? And so that's very much an R&D teams and a brands teams conversation. And then the third element is also R&D. It's very much around how we look at science and new applications of science. And we've developed 8 or so science platforms that we're investing in. And the premise of that is that they are very much aligned with the principles of green chemistry. So that's thinking about the ingredients we will use, the ingredients we will use in the future, and how we combine product development, increasing the sustainability, but also thinking about lowering the carbon footprint of the ingredients, even carbon capture. It certainly also applies to things like packaging use, because we want to make certain that it's recyclable and therefore lowers the footprint at the end of life. And the final point I just want to say is that we're starting to have conversations, or we have had conversations with consumers. I think there's much more to come on this as we start to think about how we engage with consumers and help them play out what they want to do as citizens. It was one of the questions I saw in the chat. Just one example from us is our Finnish dishwasher brand, where we encourage people to ditch the pre-rinse. And that means you save water, but it also means you save energy. And that's where I think the engagement that brands, FMCG companies like ourselves can have with consumers is really an opportunity to dial up consumer awareness and to start to subtly make changes. I mean, just in terms of water alone, Finnish in Australia saved 700 million gallons of water just since it started that program, but a few months ago, with people pledging on that. So there's opportunities of engagement that come through this. And I think that's very important to drive scale in that scope 3 conversation as one of the questions.
Okay, thank you, David. And just one question back to the calculator. Are you doing that on your own? Is that sort of proprietary, or are you doing that with partners? Is it open source?
We've set it up on our own, but we've done that with partners to make it work. And we talk a lot about it on our website. And if somebody's interested in talking further, we're very happy to have a longer conversation about it. It also plays through to some of the conversations that we have with our customers. For example, Amazon and their climate pledge friendly conversation are very much focused on how products are put together and the packaging footprint and increasingly the other aspects of sustainability that you might play into a product. So there's a touch point across different elements of the value chain when you think about this type of activity as well.
Got it. Thank you. So moving on to Brambles and JJ, I mean, I think obviously I saw you nodding when, not surprising, when Paige was talking about circularity. You've mentioned that already. But again, perhaps a little bit more specificity around sort of the high impact initiatives. What are they achieving?
Many of them, because this is ambitious enough, so we need many channels to achieve the goals. I will highlight, this is, we said that this is a value chain thing. So let's go to the beginning of our value chain. Our packaging, our pallets are made out of timber, so let's go to the forest. This is something where we have invested in the last years, achieving 100% certified timber, so producing no deforestation. Now we want to go one step beyond and enter the regenerative area. So our commitment is for every tree that we use for our products, make sure that another tree is grown sustainable plus one extra one, you know, so 2 trees per every tree that we use. And of course it has a carbon impact because we know that forests are carbon sinks. There is a carbon sequestration effect. So, and also there is a business component here. You know, we need sources, we need reliable sources of timber. You know? And if we enable the growth of new forests in places that were desertified before, and suddenly we have a source, a reliable source of timber that needs no long haul transportation from far away, that is quite sustainable as well from the business perspective. So that is a very exciting one that we are doing. I mentioned already transport collaboration, using our visibility of millions and millions of flows to reduce the empty miles. As we speak today, 30% in every region that I know, 30% of their truck transportation is normally done empty. David, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's correct.
That's correct. So we really need to work together in collaboration to take that 30% of useless driving to zero. No? And that's something that we are doing. The last thing that I want to say is that we also need to acknowledge that we don't have the solutions for the challenge, not all of them, and especially with transportation. I remember when we were setting up our ambitious targets for carbon, I was talking with a member of the board, I have to say, and I said, well, but for decarbonizing the transportation, we don't know how to do it now, no? And we said, well, JJ, if you had the answers now to all the challenges, to all the targets wouldn't be ambitious enough. No? So there is room for that. And we see that everyone is moving in the same direction. The truck manufacturers, the institutions, the governments, the European Commission just launched a big pot of money for green transportation. So many things happening already, and in others we are still exploring. But we have to be honest. No, we need to invest and we need to dedicate the efforts to make it happen.
Got it. Thank you, JJ. So let's just introduce the final topic and then move on to David and Scania. So the final topic really is around barriers. So once again, I think you know, reflecting on the role perhaps of the board here, you know, what are those barriers? What are they saying? What needs to be dismantled in order for progress to be made against this agenda? And it's not perhaps, it's too much to ask for every organization to be out sort of, you know, right at the front end of innovation. You don't expect everybody to be there, but we do know there are risks in being a laggard as well. And so I think just reflecting both at a systemic level and a company level about the barriers and some of the lessons learned. These are questions we ask in the interviews. And the barriers is perhaps pretty obvious, but people recognize, obviously, this is a systemic issue. And David, I'm sure we'll touch on this when you speak, but there are many, and JJ has just mentioned it, there are many parts of the market which need to work together. If you're a very large organization, you know, JBS, Gilberto was saying, as given their significant size, they can make really, really big differences, but you do need some supportive policy and regulation behind it as well. And that needs to be both coherent, sort of sector, cross sectors, but also, of course, cross geographies. Now, we can't expect that to be in place first. So we've got to work with that as a challenge and as a barrier. The second interesting barrier that comes up is this idea of prioritization or investment. And to paraphrase, of course, you know, capital allocation is always a challenge. So which, you know, what are we trying to achieve? Which out of our many projects do we invest our money in? But I think that it's particularly challenging here because I think there is still, notwithstanding everything that's been said, I think there is still a challenge of integrating this into the business model. And board members, non-exec directors, I think everything you can do to help your organizations assimilate this massive challenge to all our businesses, to their very existence, and understand how to assimilate that, how to create the narrative, drive it into the core business, I think is going to help that business and safeguard that business's future. So I think notwithstanding the positive comments we've had, you know, that points to a bit of a challenge. And then without going through the rest of it, we'll just drop down to the bottom. And you know, we do ask about, you know, what have people learned as they try and progress against this agenda? And this just reinforces, and many comments made already, that Gilberto, for instance, started with talking about coordination. It's actually collaboration, which is so much required. And very often with new partners or with similar partners like your supply chain, but on a new topic. So it's not easy. It requires education, as has already been mentioned. You know, the Reckitt and their consumers, extremely interesting, because a lot of people are absorbing this, making, you know, high-level binary judgments, and that's not necessarily driving us in the right direction. So a little bit more sophistication, education, engagement is important with all those stakeholders. So David Lance, please, if we could sort of just touch perhaps on an initiative, but also reflect on barriers for you, that would be fantastic.
Sure. Absolutely. Let me also try to cover one of the questions, the last question, which was, I think was directed to me regarding battery electric vehicles, since that's something that we're working on very much now. And so battery electric vehicles are obviously a big part of decarbonizing the transport system. And there is no doubt that the future of transport for road transport is going to be electric. So what we're doing, because there's a question here about how sustainable are these electric vehicles. Now, if you look at the vehicle itself and when we produce the vehicle, so what we have done to make it more sustainable, because the batteries themselves, they have some serious sustainability challenges. So one of them being that it takes a lot of electricity to produce a battery. So what we have done is that we have invested into a battery manufacturer that is based in Sweden called Northvolt. They will they're building their battery production facility where they have access to 100% renewable electricity next to very old hydro power plants. We have a very good source of renewable energy in Sweden, luckily. So that's one part of the solution. However, we still have challenges with some of the minerals going into the batteries, and that's something that we're continuously working on. And no one today, unfortunately, has a good solution for how to recycle a battery. There is no commercially viable process for that yet. We are looking into it, the industry is looking into it, and I'm sure we will solve that challenge. But that's something we have to continue to work on. And we have, over the years, we've always invested very heavily in R&D. And so what we have done is that we have redirected those investments into battery electric vehicles a lot over the last few years. Now, when you look at then getting a battery electric vehicle out on the road, in some markets today, it's already commercially viable. If you want to run a city bus in Northern Europe, great. You can do that. You have the market conditions to do that. If you want to run a battery electric truck in a city that doesn't allow for any end pipe emissions, you have a great business case for doing that. If you want to do it in a market where I'm based, such as Malaysia, where unfortunately fossil fuels are still subsidized, it's much more challenging, for sure. And so it's all about working in partnerships with the regulators to create the right market conditions for this to be able to happen. But we also have to go one step further. We have to look at where we source the fuel itself or the energy. So either it's electricity for an electric truck, or it's a combustible fuel for a diesel truck or for a gas vehicle, for instance. So again, if we look at the case of running a electric vehicle in Sweden, it's great again because you can source 100% fossil-free, or even if you want 100% renewable electricity. However, in a market like Malaysia, you can't do that. So unfortunately, running an electric truck here today gives you a very marginal reduction in CO2 emissions. So if you would look at something like running on, say, used cooking oil that's certified according to all the international standards, you can reduce your CO2 footprint with up to 80%, which is great. However, again, another barrier then is that used cooking oil fuel is, it's 3-4 times more expensive than running on conventional diesel. So the barrier to do that is still very, very high. So in order to make this happen, perseverance is definitely the name of the game, and we have to work with all stakeholders in society. We have to work with regulators, but we also have to work with our customers so they can get access to this technology, can learn how to use it. But we also have to work with partners. So if someone wants to have an electric truck or an electric bus for that matter, it's not something you can just charge in your regular socket. If you have a car, if you drive a car, you probably drive, maybe if you drive a lot, maybe 10,000, 20,000 kilometers in a year, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 kilometers in a year. If you drive a commercial vehicle a lot, you drive close to 300,000 kilometers in a year. So you need a lot more energy. And to be able to charge your vehicle and to fill it up with all that energy, you need to talk to the grid owner. You need to work in partnerships with charging infrastructure providers, and this is something that we're doing. So to be able to make all of this happen, we really have to work in partnerships. So I think goal number 17 is by far the most important of all the sustainable development goals, because we have to do this together, and that's something we're working on a lot.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Thank you, David. So unfortunately, rich conversation, we've sort of run out of time. So what I'd like to do is just ask each of the panelists to just provide one word or one sentence and not more of the most important sort of lesson learned. So, what are you taking forward? What do you want to share with others? And so putting you on the spot slightly, so sorry about that, but we'll start with Paige, then go to David Croft, then JJ, then finalize with David Lance. So Paige.
I think for us, the biggest lesson learned, and someone mentioned it earlier, is you can't do this alone, right? We all have to be working in concert with others, lock arms, even if they're competitors, and learn from each other and try to open source as much as your knowledge as possible, because we have to do it together.
Thank you, Paige. David Croft.
Yes to collaboration, but I'd also build to that and say, let's tie it to outcomes for the business. And then you get that buy-in that drives creative business thinking. And let's be honest, businesses are usually very good at solving problems. Tie it to a business outcome and they help you to find solutions that would otherwise not be there.
Thank you. JJ?
I mean, the Paige, what you said is absolutely, the priority for us as well, collaboration. I will say also that the risks and opportunities are huge, and we need to start actions now. Not wait 5 or 10 years. We need to start actions immediately.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And David, your final word from you.
Yeah, I think what we have learned is that we need to take action now, otherwise we will be left behind. So there's a huge risk in not doing that. And in order to achieve all of these targets, we have to work in partnerships. That's the only way forward.
Got it. So thank you so very much, panelists. It's a pity we don't have 2.5 days to debate this, but we will we'll move on to our final keynote now. So just by way of introduction, so we are very lucky to have Datuk Sazali Hamzah. So Sazali is the Vice President and Chief Executive Officer of Petronas Chemicals Group, Berhad. It's the largest integrated chemicals producer in Malaysia and one of the largest in Southeast Asia. Over 29 years of experience in oil and gas industries across Petronas subsidiaries, and including a number of corporate transformation programs, including enhancing plant performance and operational excellence. So in Sazali's current role, his priorities are driving execution excellence and good governance. And both of those obviously under the broader umbrella of driving sustainable long-term value. So Sazali, thank you very much for participating. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. It is really an honor for me to participate in this kind of conversation, and for me also it's quite really happy to see that a lot of industry is really looking into this climate change effort. And as what the panelists have said, it is really it is our responsibility actually to do this. And despite that, we don't have the silver bullet for all the problem, we have to act now. So in our perspective, especially in my perspective as a chemical player, we also contribute to this emission, and at the same time, we are responsible to find a way to reduce this. So in this sense, we are looking into also at 3 areas that we think is so critical that that the panelists have discussed just now. One, if you look at, is at the people itself. So that include the collaboration of the people, and in order for people to collaborate, they need to understand, they need to appreciate, they need to be educated the importance of climate change. Without that, our effort will not be supported, and this act cannot be done by one single entity. It involves the industry player, it involves regulator, as well as this involves all the masses, the people, the public that have to support that. Secondly, while doing this is of course involve cost, and we need to be responsible to balance between our business and investment in this area. And some panelists also have said this is a good approach where we need to put some side money to really invest in this team, whether through R&D, through collaboration with startup company to find new solution of our current issues. So my own experience, for example, one of our largest cracker, we tried to find a solution how can we reduce the emission. So we found that the latest generation of catalyst can do better in terms of energy emission. So what we do when we replace this catalyst, we are able to reduce 30% of our emission. This is a huge achievement. And we do this, of course, with our technology partner. Without us having the asset and without the technology partner, this will not happen. Another good example also that I would like to share here is also that we put a lot of effort to find what is the option for us to convert CO2 into a better product. So similarly, through our client, through our customer, we found that there's few solutions that we can do in order to address this. So what we do is some of the CO2 emission from our plant, we can convert it. So this convert it into a valuable product which is more green. We also look at an option to utilize the green energy. So solar panel is now become one of the good green energy, pump it to the grid, and as industry, we also look at certain facility that can be consumed by this green energy. So this kind of effort will continue, and we put the target. And in order to do that, hopefully, our achievement to reach net zero carbon emission by 2040, 2050, in our case is 2050, will be realized. But as you said, we must commit it now. We need to put investment there in order to arrive with that. And SGD 13, which actually help us to guide us to move into the right path as well. So the last one that I would like also to conclude that the challenges that we face, there is certain issue that we face, there is no technology solution at this moment. So what we need to do is we have to continue to invest, continue to find option, and again, this cannot be done alone. And for our case, we do reach out to our client, we do reach out to startup, and we do reach out to our R&D sector to look at some of the options that we can do in order to contribute to zero net emission. So basically, that's at the end of the day, I would like to conclude that I'm really encouraged to see that all industry just now is all the 4 different industry talking about the same thing. And JJ, I think, found a very good total circular solution. This is the wish that we also aspire to be. So I think that's basically that I would like to share with you, Sam.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you. for that. And I know it's relatively recent, that 2050 aspiration at the Petronas level. So, you know, all the very best with delivering against that. So perhaps, you know, we haven't really heard that much about resilience. So the implications of climate change on our infrastructure, etc. Today, you know, there's been a lot of focus on circularity and emission, you know, perhaps, you know, how we transition. So could you say, Sazali, a little bit about resilience from your company's perspective? So adaptation?
Basically, the most important thing, our value driver engine need to continue to operate. While doing that, we need to run at most optimum. And by doing that, we reduce our contribution to emission. And portion of that money have to be invested, continue in this kind of space. So without the value driver to continue to drive, especially like this situation where COVID-19 and OPEC plus issues, if our business is not sustainable, so that kind of effort will also will not be continued. So it is also important to be resilient for the business to go through this phase while supporting the effort on climate change. So that's what my view in terms of resilience. And at the same time also, while approaching this, we are not really looking at particular project return. It must be looked at the whole value chain. The end of the day, if the whole value chain is sustainable, to invest in a certain carbon reduction initiative, that is what we believe that it's a resilient for that organization to drive through this aspiration.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. So you've touched on it a bit, but there's been plenty of discussion about the value chain and scope 3. You know, that's critically important to many of the companies that we heard from today. It's obviously very important for you in terms of feedstock, product logistics, etc. So could you just sort of dig into that a little bit? So obviously we've got an overall 2050 target. So what's your ambition around that part?
Actually, Sam, we have put a lot of focus in scope 1 and scope 2 at this moment. And we're just beginning to look at our scope 3, to look at our supply and also logistics, including the distribution. We're also looking at how actually the energy be used for this, because we use a lot of ship to deliver our product in a major bulk. And in this space, what other better option in terms of energy efficient as well as low carbon footprint? One of them probably methanol used as an fuel for the ship. A green hydrogen is now we also looking at from ammonia, green ammonia. So this is sort of thing that we look at it just at the beginning, very infant stage. And this year we also actually get the subject matter expert on scope 3 as well to assist us to really work on our roadmap. I believe once we have firm up with our roadmap, then we can say something and put what needs to be done in this sense. So to be frank, at scope 3 we are still at infant stage. We are in the past focus in scope 1, scope 2, and we are moving into scope 3.
Okay, Sazali, thank you very much. And I do think, you know, I was listening to Mark Carney yesterday talk about his book. One of his values in that book is around humility. And I do think, you know, the recognition from business, you know, where they need help, you know, the stage in the journey they're at, Sazali, just demonstrated by you, I just think is really important if we're going to accelerate progress. This is not all about celebrating success. This is about being humble in the face of enormous challenges. So thank you for that. So my final question, Sazali, is to I mean, given the audience, of course, given the broader event here is around sort of governance per se, you know, you sit there at the top table of your organization, but, you know, what do you sort of expect? What role do you think non-exec directors particularly should play? What do you expect them to play? And perhaps a few sort of broader suggestions for others, not just necessarily purely around you and your business.
Yeah. So in our case, we used to be a non-public listed company, and then we convert into a public listed company. Then because of that, we bring a non-executive or not independent director as part of our board. Now they are having 50-50 composition between dependent and independent. And that actually provides a big challenge to what we do, which is good, where they challenge us. And the perspective of climate change and also sustainability, I believe that it is good to have 1 or 2 year back director really equipped with the understanding of climate change. And that will help us actually to challenge the way we do things, the way we create the path. This is where the board can play a very important role, because I give an example, for any project that we are sanctioned now, one of the key considerations is that what is your carbon footprint result? And do we find the most possible lowest carbon footprint as an option? So in the past, we just look at how much technology, what good technology all about, not part of the carbon footprint, but this is now become a requirement. So having board that have that competency, understanding will challenge the way we do things. And at the same time, it also helps in terms of our branding as well. So this is where actually I believe the independent board can play important role to shape the organization to push further this agenda.
Okay, Datuk Sazali, thank you so much. And I hope all non-execs were listening to that, taking that on board and really driving change in their own organizations. So Sharmila, over to you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for everybody for listening and participating. As I said, we'll get back to you on the Q&A, but Sharmila, please, if you can close us down.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam. And wow, what a loaded 1.5 hours we've had. I feel so inspired to have, and I've been furiously making notes and thinking of ideas that I can take back to my board and our board sustainability committee. So thank you so much, Gilberto, Datuk Sazali, for your insightful sharing and learnings, and also to you, Sam, for excellent moderating of session, and to our 4 incisive panelists. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, just some key thoughts, you know, as I listened in today. Public-private partnership and private-private partnerships collaboration seems to be key if we want to take this forward. Towards decarbonization, towards finding alternative options, towards contributing towards to zero net emissions. Datuk Sazali very rightly pointed out, and you know, you, Sam, picked it up on the need to be humble, to have humility and reaching out when we need help, and guidance on this to, you know, take our path forward. We need to free our minds and not view things or the business from the traditional business as usual perspective, but perhaps with a more entrepreneurial and transformational mindset. How do we create circular economies within our businesses? Can we create a circular ecosystem? As JJ mentioned, this requires collaboration yet again. We heard clearly that customers, employees, and investors in particular are interested in how businesses address climate issues, but it is not all alarm bells. We've heard from our speakers that there are many opportunities to be grasped with both hands. We know that the role of the independent directors and the non-executive directors is increasingly crucial in steering the companies and the boards they sit on. But if there is a singular takeaway that I have come up with, I think it has to be that the future is here. We need to act now. So as you leave this webinar, you will be presented with a brief survey. We would be really grateful if you could let us have just another 2 minutes of your time to provide us with your feedback on today's session that will help us plan for the future and improve the way we deliver our sessions. I'm sure that all of you, like me, are encouraged and stimulated on this journey of accelerating climate action in your companies. It is clear that there is no prescribed path. We're all in this learning together. So please join the Climate Governance Initiative. You can find them at climate-governance.org, or if you're in Malaysia, you can find us at cgmalaysia.com. And very, very importantly, please get involved, get your companies involved with the Goal 13 Impact Platform. They're a valuable partner in your company's climate journey. And you can contact the Goal 13 Impact Platform team at Goal 13 Impact Platform, one word, at Deloitte.co.uk. That's Goal 13 Impact Platform at Deloitte.co.uk. And just a reminder that this Global Summit continues with many more informative sessions today and tomorrow. Immediately after this session, once you filled in our survey, we have a session on decarbonizing shipping, given to us from a non-executive director's perspective. So do look at all these posters that have come up on your screen and sign up for them. Thank you and have a good evening and good rest of the day.